All right, good morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dennis Hancock. I get to be the Center Director at the U.S. Dairy Forage Research Center based here in Madison. We have 3 research units actually. 2 of those are based in Madison and 1 up in Marshfield. And we have our research dairy is located outside of Prairie du Sac, and we also have a research dairy partnership with UW up in Marshfield as well, just outside of Marshfield. We always get this opportunity to put these seminar series together each year, and it's always a pleasure to introduce one of our producer participants in the World Forage Analysis Super Bowl. And if you've looked at some of the sheets that have come through over the last few years, you will certainly have recognized the name of the gentleman that we've invited to speak today. And so with no further ado, I'm going to ask David Hinman to come up and introduce his operation and learn a little bit about how he makes hay. So David, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you again. I want to thank the World Dairy Expo Research Committee for allowing me to come and talk about alfalfa, a crop I love to put up. Been doing it for a number of years since we kind of cut back from several other crops. Before I get started, I'll give you a little bit of information about myself. I grew up in western Nebraska on a farm. We farmed, had beef cows, did some yearlings, run a lot of corn, a little bit of alfalfa and dry beans. Moved to Wheatland, Wyoming in 1984 because I couldn't get enough farm ground to farm around that Scottsbluff area. It was pretty tight, and we found a farm up there, so ended up moving up there in 1984, and with my dad saying that you don't want to do that. He said, that's rocky, there's no water up there, not very good farm ground. And I said, well, I can't get anything down here, that's where I'm going. So I left and started out on my own, went up there with a 400-acre farm we leased. And this is not the farm that we leased, but this is the farm we have now. This circle that shows part of it, that's part of our hay barn, and then we have some grain storage we put up in the background also. We used to raise a lot of corn, so we have 100,000 bushel grain storage, and then we have actually 3 different barns we used to put hay in. This barn here, and then some other ones by the house. But anyway, when I moved up there, the water was short. The crop prices were good though because it was a smaller area. Wheatland area consists of about 50 to 55,000 acres of irrigated ground. And the irrigation is a major part. If we didn't have irrigation, we only get 7 to 10 inches of rain a year. Most of that is in the winter time with snow and blowing snow and a lot of wind. And so the spring, summers, and falls are perfect in Wyoming. The winter time, if you can go somewhere else, you need to be there because you don't want to be there in the winter time. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about irrigation. It started in 1881, an Irish immigrant by the name of John Gordon. He was down in Greeley, Colorado. He came up through there on horseback, and he seen the Wheatland Flats, and it's a pretty big flat area around the Wheatland. And he looked at it, he thought there may be a way if we could get some water into this area, it'd be similar to the Greeley area. And so they got a study going in 1882 and 1883 and decided if they could bring water from the Laramie River over to the Bluegrass Creek, down the Bluegrass Creek into the Sabile River, and then back out, we could use it to irrigate. The only problem is there was a 2,280-foot granite mountain in the way. So what do? So they got 1,000 Chinese workers to come in and dig that tunnel through the mountain. And the way they did it, they set up railroad tracks into the hole, they drilled into it, blasted it, and then hauled the rock out and used that along the riverbeds and that. It took them over 1.5 years to dig the tunnel, or maybe 2 years, I don't know, but I don't know how many of them died. There's still some huts up there where they lived. But they started on both sides of the granite hill and they met in the middle. How do you do that in the 1800s? It's just unbelievable how that somebody could see that and do that kind of project, to me, to bring water back down so we can irrigate. So that's what they did, and then once they did that, they brought the water from Laramie out when it melted down through the tunnel, built their canals on down to irrigate, but problem is it only lasted for 2 weeks. They didn't have any storage. So then the next project was to start building reservoirs. And so the Wheatland Development Company, this is the way they dug it, mostly slips, and you can see some of the stuff. You can imagine how long it took to do some of that work. So then they built 2 reservoirs, the Wheatland number 1, which is right outside of Wheatland. Wheatland number 2 is up north of Laramie on the Laramie River. And then they added an additional Wheatland number 3 reservoir. So they had enough water storage where we could irrigate for the full year. And by then it was 1933, 34, when they were starting to get that water into there. They didn't have any farmers. Well, so they started advertising for farmers to come in. That was the drought years. I don't know if you remember, some of you are older than I am. Remember the 1930s when it was droughty and they didn't have any water anywhere. So they got farmers out of Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, anywhere they could get them to come in there. And they were selling them and giving them land, 640 acres at a tract, if they would come in and farm that so they could get that water adjudicated to the land so they could get the water rights tied up. So that's kind of what they ended up doing. So we get a snowpack report, so we know kind of how much water we get every year. They do this once a month, do water content. You can kind of follow through. You can see the Laramie River, and you can see some of the other ones in Wyoming there. Crow Creek, Medicine Bow, Little Laramie. Big Laramie River is the one we get most of it. Little Laramie is north of us, so we don't get any water out of there. But it tells you what it was last year, and it tells you what it was this year. This year our water was pretty good. It's been pretty good since I've been up there. We've been farming up there for 40 years now. And we've had 1 year where we got very little water, I think 10 days of water in 2002, I believe it was. And it was a very dismal year because we were out of water and the stuff burned up and wasn't very good. We don't have any wells. That's the other thing out where we're at. We have clay underneath of us, so we don't have any wells. If you go north of us about 4 to 5 miles, there's some rock creek runs through, and they can actually drill wells and get wells out of that area. So this is our reservoir capacities now, so you can kind of see we track it so everybody knows what they got, and then we allocate it out, and it's all measured out. So we have 120 miles of canals that we run water through into our area to get water so we can farm. That's kind of that, gives you an idea of what we allotted each year. 2022 there was only 80.82. So now we get into the good stuff, the alfalfa and irrigating. Everything that we do basically is with pivot irrigation now because it's so efficient. We can put it on and it just makes it so much easier. The pivot irrigation actually started in the Wheatland area back in the late 70s with some of the older pivots. A lot of them have been updated now. The way I irrigate, to get rid of in first cutting we have problems with aphids and weevils. So the first cutting I run the pivots real slow. I'll run them and put an 1.5 to 2 inches of water on as we're going. Keeps the aphids and weevil washed down. Normally we don't have to spray. So that helps us a lot. We've learned that over the years, that we run them slow and get rid of the pests that way. That's one of our irrigation canals. That's on my place. So I am the far south end of the Wheatland Flats. Thank you. So that's the size of the canal there. Then that canal also goes probably another, I want to say 25 miles from there around in a curve and under the interstate, because there's a big flume under the interstate when they put it in, and then goes on to the east side of Wheatland to irrigate with. This is actual Laramie River water that comes out of the Wheatland number 2 and number 3 reservoir. The water that is north of me comes out of the little reservoir, which is straight west of Wheatland, so we don't get any water out of that reservoir, but we get it out of the other 2. Soil types. Our soil there is pretty rocky. One of the farms I bought, we bought a Gallenberg rock picker. I don't know if anybody knows about a Gallenberg rock picker. They're made here in Wisconsin. and goes 12 inches deep, does potato chain, bounces the rocks out. We took 25 to 30 ton of rock per acre off. I mean, it's rocky there. And you get further north from where I am, it's really rocky. And they haul rocks off and haul rocks off, and more rocks come up to the funeral, and then they can just keep going. So, but anyway, finally get some of the land cleaned up, and you can raise really good crops. The crops they raise in that area now are sugar beets, malt barley, corn, dry beans, and alfalfa, a little bit of oats. So the alfalfa and the corn are the biggest two crops. 8,500 acres of alfalfa, probably 9,000 acres of corn raised in our area. So it's a real limited district. And like I said, it's privately owned yet, so we own all the reservoirs, all the water rights, everything back into the 1800s. So it's a good outfit. The pH in our soil there is a 7.8 to 8.2, so we have some alkali problems. So a lot of the water that comes down through the Laramie River drainage has got alkali, and it brings it on down. Pests and insects, there's the worst pest you can have right there is a gopher. Because they're hard to get rid of, and for some reason they're exploding now, and they mess up the swathers. They just tear up everything, and we've been fighting those for the last 3 years. I don't know why or where they came from, and then every now and then you have prairie dogs too, and I don't know if you know what prairie dogs are, but they're a nuisance too, and if they get into one of your hay fields, you just well quit farming it because their mounds are that high versus a gopher mounds. Trying to think any other pests. If anybody has any questions, just holler at me and I can stop and catch you up or whatever. Weather factors. This is one of the reasons we can put up some good hay. We have real low humidity and warm days, cool nights, and we can get that hay dried out and it's still green. Okay, I got this picture here and here. Can anybody tell me why I put this picture in there? If I get up in the morning and I see this power plant, which is back in the background on the Laramie River, and there's steam coming out of there, I know my hay's tough. If there's steam there, that's it. Everybody watches that's putting up hay, because the minute you get up and you can see that, and there's lights out there at night, you know you got humidity, you can go out and start baling. Most of our hay is baled early in the morning or at night. I've went out in the evenings at 10, 11 o'clock and baled till midnight, and then it may get a little bit too damp, then you'll have to wait and bale the next day. When we little bale, we don't rake any of it. If I enter hay in the contest, I don't rake it. So if you're going to enter hay in this contest, don't rake it, pick it up with a little baler, keeps it cleaner. You don't have any trash raked into it. It just makes it a lot better. Raked hay is when I use for the big baler. So there's some of our little bales over here, and my wife Teri sitting down here. She runs the little baler, and she also runs the swather. That's kind of her baby. And I do some of the raking, and I do some of the bundling. She has run the bale bundler quite a bit also. I do most of mine in the big square bales. And our markets, we're going to talk a little bit about markets. When I entered this contest about 12 years ago, we didn't have a lot of markets. We were shipping mostly to Colorado to the dairies down there and arguing with them, fighting with them if the quality was or wasn't there. You get hay down there and then they retest it. Well, that's not the hay we bought. And now the Amish have kind of got a hold of me out of Iowa at Kelowna, and through their looking at the feed analysis and the quality of the hay, they wanted me to ship some hay to them, so I went ahead and shipped some hay to them. And they liked the hay, so now we've been doing business with them for the last 12 or 13, since they looked at it in this contest. So now we try to ship them at least 50 semi-loads a year of big bales. They can't afford the little bales. The little bales are a little more of a niche market. They go for horses or local people with goats or whatever, but a lot of horse people. And we send those into Oklahoma, quite a few into Oklahoma. We sent some into Texas, some into Arizona. As far as South Carolina, some of them have went for goat dairies also. And we bundle those. This is the little baler that my wife runs, and this is the bale bearing that we run. John Deere tractors. I like John Deere, grew up John Deere, still John Deere, so always be green, I guess. But I do like the red balers and that part. And those two pieces of equipment make a lot of money in the niche market. But you got to have them. If you're going to try to handle little bales by hand, thing of the past, I guess. There's just nobody wanting to do it. I can load a semi out in about 45 minutes, 756 bales on it, and get it strapped down and ready to go on a flatbed with little bales. And we used to, when I first started baling, when I moved to Wheatland, we had a wire tie little baler, and that's the way we shipped hay to Colorado. And we used an 8-pack to load the trucks versus a bale bearing, and then we went to round bales, and then from round bales we went to the big square bales, and then back to the little bales now. So now we're doing both, and really like the hay deal. Here's kind of a picture of my big baler, and I got to run an accumulator, and then have a semi-trailer truck that we go out and pick up the bales, haul them into the barns. We try to get anything that doesn't get rained on or anything that we think is quality direct out of the field into a barn. We don't leave it out at all, hardly. I mean, it goes direct into the barn, so when we take it back out of the barn, it's green, dry, and clean. That's just some of the feed tests. We run feed tests through Dairyland. We test everything. It's one of those things when you get into the fourth cutting, I get pretty excited because that's all I see is leaves on the ground, and the hay's about a foot tall, or maybe 8 to 10 inches tall even, but it's all leaves. So you cut it nice in the windrow, and I can't wait to get that test back because I just got to see what it is. I try to beat my record every year, and it's hard to do that, but I send it in right away. My daughter, she raises show calves, and she AIs. She used to AI. She's kind of quit that program now, but she had to wait a year, 9 months to see what she got out of hers. I can wait just a few days after I get it cut and baled and see what it is. And it surprised you how good some of the hay you can get put up. I know this was some third cutting. And the ways we found the markets were through this contest. So this is how, you got to talk to growers, you got to talk to producers, get out. And this is some of the alfalfa size of the leaves we get on fourth cutting. If you can, they fit in the size of your hand. So that's, when you get those kind of leaves, you'll get over 300 RFE real easy. And it's just in 29-30% protein. I mean, it is some rich, high quality feed. So I don't know what my time is, but got any? Okay, anything else you want me to cover, go over? Right now, our farm that we live on, that we own, is 700 acres. And we have 2 pivots of grass on it that we run cows on. We have a beef cow herd also that we run cows on that. And then we have 2 pivots of alfalfa on that farm. So there's 240 in one, there's another 80 in another one. My daughter has a pivot that's got 50 acres basically on it. Total acres of alfalfa we've been doing, we were up around 1,000. I've cut back a little bit now since I rented some out. At one time we were up at close to 3,000 acres. And I'm trying to slow down, and I've got a neighbor I'm mentoring now, and he's getting into the hay production. And so he took over some of the ground this year and probably a little more next year. So we do also 80% grass. That's what my daughter's got. And so we go to the grass alfalfa. That's another niche market, basically. And that's all little bales we try to put up. The Amish do buy grass when they wean or when they shut the goats off from milking and dry them up. They start feeding them grass so they don't milk as heavy. And then when they kid them again in the spring, in February, March, then they want to start them out on really good, rich alfalfa. The higher the better, they said. Because once they get their milk production up at the top level, if they keep feeding them that good a quality hay, their milk level maintains. But the minute they drop the quality goes down. They say they have a hard time bringing it back up. So if the quality starts deteriorating and they can't find that kind of hay, then they can't get that production back up till the next year. So, yep. You know, I didn't go into the planting and that, but we plant 22 to 24 pounds per acre. I've got fields we've had in there 10 years. Really good hay, and then sometimes if they start losing stand, we'll go in and interseed orchard grass into it, leave it another 4 or 5 years. I didn't talk a little bit about when we take alfalfa out, we take it out and put corn in it. Of course, we have the nitrogen buildup, so we use that for corn. So the alfalfa, when we go into plant alfalfa in the corn stalks, we disc them as much as we can, get them worked down good, and I'll plant directly into real short stubble, and then we roller harrow it. We get a good seed bed, as good as what we can. We do have some complaints about corn stalks ending up in the hay in that first cutting, because it is a real rich cutting also when you do seeding, if you can keep it clean, which we do spray a lot of the hay on the new seedings. But no, we've left alfalfa stands in there a lot longer than what they recommend doing. So, and the different varieties, I did a lot of different tests on farms. One circle I'll have 5 different varieties put in there. So it'll be a wheel track to wheel track to wheel track. And there's a lot of difference on the health and the survival rate of those varieties, and that's interesting to watch. And then also the quality. The quality isn't a lot different from what you would think. You can get quality hay out of a lesser quality alfalfa seed if you do it right. But the Harv Extras, the Alpha-Rex, and some of those, Alpha-Rex actually has been some of my best seed as far as a low lignin type seed, and it's still not a Roundup or a chain. And the Amish are real picky about, they don't want any of the Roundup seeds. So. Like I said, we've got some in there 10 to 12 years right now. I've got one, we'll probably interseed some grass in it next year. We looked at it this spring and we didn't. But we'll probably interseed some grass into some next year. But it'll last another probably up to 15 years, I would guess. We have some neighbors that'll put it in 3 years and take it out and rotate it. But they're raising corn, beans, barley, sugar beets. I mean, they're raising, and they have a rotation. Well, it just depends on if we take a pivot out. If a pivot's 130 acres, we'll have 130 acres of corn. Back when we were rocking and rolling, we had 700 acres of beets. We had, what did we have? 400 acres of malt barley. Had dry beans. Had 2,500 acres of corn, had 3 hired bin, and lots of pivots, and covering from 20 to 25 mile radius where we were going. So there was a lot of land available up there to farm, and Teri and I have kind of slowed down, said we didn't want the headaches anymore, so we've kind of let a lot of those go. I did give up another pivot this year, or last year too, and it was in alfalfa, good alfalfa, but they're just trying to slow down and relax a little bit longer. No, we don't have employees, just Teri and myself. We do all the work. We try to get 4 on everything, but normally we'll get 4 on 75% of the ground. And the other ones are, there's the weather factors come into play a lot, because if you get a wet spring and you get rain, you can't get it off, or a second cutting can't get it off. Or I look at weather bug, I watch the weather apps a lot, and it says it's not going to rain, but it does rain, and you don't get that off. That's where you end up only getting 3 cuttings, because you're held up a week. And the other thing is, when we go into bale, if we go into bale, a lot of times we'll wait 3 days to get a dew. I mean, you're just sitting there. You go out there in the morning, the wind's blowing. You go 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't see this, you're out for the day. And then you just sit and wait. If you've irrigated that hay, and I like to irrigate the hay right up 2 days before we cut it. So it's damp, the ground's a little damp yet. Cut it, so that hay's starting back right away. So if you start waiting a week before we get dews, and you can't little bale that hay if there's no dew on it and it's dry stems. I mean, this hay here had dew on it, a little heavier dew. That's the reason I brought it. This hay was baled on Sunday, and it's a mix, about a 50-50 mix there. And beautiful morning to bale. They baled a whole half circle. And but yeah, that's the problem. So it varies. The weather factors are big key factors in our area. Normally you guys have too much moisture here. We don't have enough there. We're sitting waiting. If the wind's blowing at night, we're done. But we get the cool nights. A lot of times the humidity comes up just enough where we can tie up some hay, but our window's pretty tight. So you may only get a half hour. I try to, when I go out and bale big bales, I try to get 90 to 100 ton put up in a morning, which gives me 4 semi-loads to get in the barn. So we try to go 28 to 32. And then on the grass, alfalfa, the grass, we fertilize every cutting. Take off the first, we fertilize it for a second. We take off the second, we fertilize for the third. Take off the third, we fertilize for the fourth. If you didn't fertilize it, you don't get any you don't get any tonnage. I mean, and then you get the nice dark green grass when you fertilize it. I mean, it just makes a lot of difference. You get the production. But it's all key is water, fertilizer, timing, humidities. There's a lot of factors that come in on the hay, which is just got to deal with. The biggest word I always say about hay is you got to have a lot of patience. I mean, you got to have a lot of patience. It just takes, some days you're a week getting out, getting it baled, and then you get a perfect day. I mean, it'll be perfect. You can bale almost all day. It'll be a cloudy day or something will happen and you get all caught up. 40 rock, 1846, some urea I use on grass. Just potash, I like potash too. Yep. Any questions in the back? We'll use 200 at a time. And sometimes it's cheaper than 1152 or the 1846, so I like the 40 rock. It's got a little sulfur in it and some of the other stuff in it, so works better for hay. But, I got my own spreader. Yeah, I have them bring up a bulk truck and then we spread it. It costs so much to get everybody to do, and then the service and the timing. We've had several different fertilizer companies come into our area, but it's so small they can't really make it work, and so they leave, and then you're trying to bring outside people in, and that's a critical thing around us is getting it done when you need it done. And everything now today is sprayed, you know, with the other crops because of the Roundup, so everybody's getting their own sprayers, or you got them spraying and they don't get the fertilizers out. And it's tough. Most of our fertilizer will come out of Torrington or even clear out of Scotts Bluff, which is 100 miles away. We have a local plant there now, and it's changed hands 3 times in the last 5 years. And I don't know why, because they just aren't competitive enough to go out and get these farmers. The farmers are bigger today. You know, a lot of them are still farming 4,000 acres. You know, the younger guys that are 20 years younger than I am, they're getting bigger, so they're farming more. But they're realizing that they're not, a lot of the time, especially in our area with the corn, we have a lot of wind in the fall. And if you let that corn dry down, I've got pictures of solid corn on the ground. I mean, it blows it off. So it catches them every now and then. A lot of them are raising dry beans this year. That market's pretty good, so our dry bean acreage went up this year probably 50 to 75% more than it was the year before. So you got all those beans. You got some guys trying to direct cut dry beans like soybeans, and the other ones are still windrowing them yet. And so it's all played by markets, and where the money's not in the corn right now in our area. We can't raise soybeans because we don't have a long enough growing season. So the corn, the dry beans look good. Sugar beets, they say, look pretty good. We don't have a lot of acres of sugar beets in that area. We used to raise them, and they went to Torrington, Wyoming, to the Holly plant. And Holly ended up selling it to Crystal, and Crystal ended up leasing it to Western Sugar, and Western Sugar made you buy subscription acres, and that's when we quit the beets in 2002. And they wanted you to pay $175 to raise beets, and I didn't want to do that because we had 750 acres of beets at that time. That's a pretty good check. And then the market went real south after that, and they hardly made any money for the next 3 or 4 years. And now that factory's closed. So all those beets that are raised in Wheatland go all the way to Scotts Bluff, so you have a 100-mile freight deal to get all those beets. And there's about 1,400 acres raised now compared to what there was, 4,500 to 5,000 acres in our area. So the sugar market's good. I love raising sugar beets, but the trucks and labor, and we used to hire a lot of Mexican labor to come out, but then right about the time we were quitting is when they went to the Roundup, so we missed the Roundup stuff. So we always had labor bills, but made it a lot easier with the Roundup, and they're getting a lot more tons now. No, I don't do any trucking. All of our trucking is hired by the customer that buys the hay. So they line up the trucks. And we've had some guys talk to us about loading little bales in the van trailers. I haven't did that yet, but I don't know. They say they do a lot of that up in that Riverton Powell area. I don't know if you guys are getting into that or not, and they're pushing bales in there and then they're pulling them out wherever they get them, even the 3x3s and 3x4s. So, hey Dan. So, no, all the trucks are lined up, so when the hay leaves my area, it belongs to the customer. And I even get nervous when they're trying to tarp loads on our property and the wind's blowing 30 mile an hour, and if I can't get them backed into one of my buildings, it's pretty, and I've seen some guys almost come off those trucks, and I just cringe every time I see one and the weather's bad and looks like they got to tarp it. Kelowna, Iowa is where our big customer base is for the big bales. I don't think I've sent any hay into Wisconsin before. No, haven't did. Well, I have in the corn and that, but I haven't did much with the alfalfa, and I haven't used any of the other products that they're talking about, the Riser Green and some of the others. I don't know. I just Oh, well, I guess I have on the grass. Yep, grass, not the alfalfa, the grass. Yeah. Yep, 32 in the grass. I keep thinking alfalfa all the time. Alfalfa on the brain, I guess. No, not alfalfa. No, I love raising alfalfa. Praise God where I live. I mean, I get to get up and look at the mountains every morning, and we don't have a lot of population, don't have any state tax there, so beautiful place to live other than the wintertime. Anything else? There's some hay up here if you guys want to come